You're listening to Nakedly Examined Music, a podcast about songs and songwriters. My name is Mark Linsenmeyer. Our guest for episode 83 is Christopher Millar, a.k.a. Rat Scabies. He was a founding member of The Damned in 1977, one of the first-generation seminal British punk bands, and played with them more or less through the mid-90s on 8 studio albums, including 1979's Machine Gun Etiquette. You are right now listening to Love Song, the opening track from that album that Chris wrote the lyrics to. He has, in 2018, released his first solo album, P.H.D, Prison Hospital Debt, which is a collection of songs that goes back to the late 80s through the present. We're going to be discussing Daisy Bones and Rat's opus from that album. Then we'll look back to History of the World Part 1 by The Damned from the Black Album, 1980. And we'll conclude by listening to Autobahn, a cover of the Kraftwerk song by a band that Chris played with called The Germans from their 2003 Do Not Fuck With The Germans EP. For more information, please check out ratscabies.com. For more about this podcast, look to nakedlyexaminedmusic.com. And if you enjoy what we're doing, please consider a donation at patreon.com/nakedlyexaminedmusic. So I will have played some of Love Song from Machine Gun Etiquette before we start. We want to get very quickly to the new album, Daisy Bones from Prison Hospital Debt. This has been pointed to as kind of the most Damned-like song. Do you want to give us a little intro to it before we play the song in full?
Jesse Budd from a band called Flipron wrote the lyrics and sang the tune for me on the album.
All right, and where did this come in the... I know you started writing this album, some of these are as old as 85. Was this a more recent one? Was this an older one? How does this fit in the chronology?
It's much more recent. You know, like most things, you have an idea and the good ones stick around, even if it does take a year or so. So, actually, no, Daisy Bones was much more about the cigar box guitar, because I'd just made my very first one and I needed to see how it sounded. So, actually, that's how that one got recorded.
A long time. She was always so way down. It was always the wrong time. Daisy Bones, a Daisy Bones, a Daisy, don't you come down. The Daisy Bones, a Daisy, don't you come down. Daisy, don't you come down. 20
So the impression I got out of this was actually less Damned, although it has some of that theatricality and the high energy that you're known for, more like The Who. Is this an influence there?
Definitely. When I was a kid, the Who were on their period I love the most, that kind of Can't Explain, Happy Jack, and their first single. There was a lot of drums.
Yes.
So they were quite natural to be into, really.
Yes, I think of you as a new Keith Moon. I wonder what he would have been doing had he lived to 60, if he'd be playing Buddy Rich kind of stuff like you sometimes do here.
Who knows where he would have been. He was so unique as a player in his own right. Nobody else could really do what he did. I don't really play very much like him. I think the similarity and the things that I probably nicked off the Who more than anything was the dynamics of stop and start and big moments.
Yes, I mean, in this song, you've got the big theatrical intro, and I would assume usually in a verse where you have a guitar going chick, 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 then you have a closed hi-hat, but it seems like your hi-hat doesn't even close on this song, and you open it up in the chorus just by having more guitars rather than more drums. That kind of gets at what the approach was. As a drummer doing a solo album, you did most of the tracks on this yourself. Like, it seems like usually the energy of the arrangements would come... Well, you can tell me, in the heyday of the Damned, were you recording at least the rhythm section all together live as opposed to just layering everything?
We always did everything live. Pretty much it was always about trying to nail the bass and the drums. And then, the tedious process of guitar overdub. So that was kind of, it was all done live. But with this, it's a funny thing because you think that because you write the riff and the song, that actually I'll be much better at playing it. But it doesn't work like that. It's strange. Your imagination kind of moves you one step to the side, and it's what you think you've got isn't necessarily what it is. Sometimes it's a bit more of a stretch than you think it should be. But I don't get the choice either, there's only one of me, so I can't really do it like that. But quite often you'd just be inspired by a bass part that you'd written, or just a kind of a mood, if you like, something a bit more atmospheric. And that's enough to sort of start the process off.
So in this case, it was the main guitar part that kind of set what the structure of the song was, how much you'd be able to, how many measures of fills you'd be able to put in?
Yeah, I always work very simply anyway, or try to. Makes it, so I kind of do everything in full and then work around that. And then every now and again I'll throw in a bar of something that's in 5, or I'll add an extra phrase where it shouldn't really be there. It's partly mistakes and partly just kind of playing it at the moment. Sometimes you think that part of the song needs repeating just because it seemed like the right thing to do.
Well, I want to call particular attention to this place. So you really got the giant Pete Townsend windmill thing, but then having the single note synth lead line, that's what I found kind of most peculiar about that there's something funnily unbalanced about that you've got this giant thing and then the little pointy synth is the lead there.
It's sort of working in opposites. If you want something else to be going on that stands out, then it has to be the exact opposite from the big cranky guitar thing. And also, it was kind of a bit, I was just messing with some sounds and I found that one and I thought I could make the track sound like The Sweet or something like that. So I messed with it and just kind of ended up liking just like you say, it's a conflict between the two. They're both the wrong instruments to be doing that kind of, well, they shouldn't be working together as well as they do.
I mean, the gesture, it's almost, if it was a different era, it would be a vocal non-verbal, it'd be do. If this was a bubblegum pop song, it would be.
Thankfully for the public, I'm not that much of a keyboard player, so they were spared any unnecessary noodling.
In terms of the vocal approach here, if you have somebody, like, did you have a melody in mind before he came in and did this, or was it just, here's the track, do whatever you want over it?
Yeah, that's pretty much how I work. But if you have preconceptions and then ask somebody else to get involved, then they never do what your preconceptions are. So it never will sound the way you imagined it to. So I found the best thing to do is just say, listen, here it is, do your own thing and then decide whether I like it later on and if it works. And it's kind of a good way of being reinterpreted by someone else. I don't mind that happening. So yeah, I just throw it down and say, do whatever you like with it, really.
And I know with Love Song, you came up with the lyrics on that. What part of your creative process, it seems like that's just not part of what you are interested in at this point? At least the 3 vocal tunes on this, you did not write any lyrics for, right?
No. The thing is, to write a good vocal, you can write kind of good words that fit together, but actually having a melody that makes it stand out is really what I lack more than anything else. You know, I could just come up with phrases and a chorus, but it's actually the top line is the thing that I'm always short on. And I think that if you don't have the top line figured out already, then you're bound to have the words in the wrong places, so they don't scan and they won't fit, and timing will be off, and you know, and all of those kind of things. And so that's what Jesse Bunn is really good at, is coming up with a melody. And his lyrics are great. I really enjoy them. So, you know, he can do it better than I can. So I'd rather leave him to it.
There's another place I noticed about 251 in.
What about me? What you think I'm doing? I'm not doing what you think I'm doing.
So you're getting a really nice, like, Rolling Stones, Nicky Hopkins thing on the keyboard, and then also these little rim shot shenanigans that just really, it's a beautifully happy part of the song.
Well, yeah, happy's pretty good. It's the same with all the dynamics. It's kind of, once you've done that big, noisy middle bit, brash sort of section, you kind of got to go somewhere with the listener, you know. It's like, you couldn't really get much bigger than that middle 8. And so the best place to go after that is to let everybody catch their breath and go down a bit and make it kind of breathing space, I think, for the listener.
And the guitar solo that you go into right after that is another one of those I associated with Pete Townsend. Maybe that's the wrong, but this single note, this tremolo thing, which is a wonderful, just wonderfully effective, surprisingly difficult, I would think.
I could have cheated and dropped it in on a computer and made it do that and everything. I like the flaws and the blemishes sometimes, because it reminds people listening that it's somebody actually doing it and we're all fallible. I just think it makes it more human.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, I could have cheated, but I didn't see the point. And I also realised that every other group in the world, you know, or many, many other guitar players will be, well, why did he leave it like that? Which then means that it's deliberate, which then means it's open to question, which makes it a much better thing to have done.
As far as the order in which this was done, I mean, did you have the basis and then have the vocals put on and then color it up, or was it just a pretty much completed, fully energetic thing, and then you just said, okay, we just add the top line and we're done here?
Well, it kind of varied. I mean, you know, because the tracks were recorded over a period, so some of it was done one way and some of it was done another. I mean, some of it, you know, like the song Rat Scabies, when I did that, for example, I was working very closely with the guy who sings it, Robbie Allen, from Long Beach down there. So we kind of did that together, so that worked. But then something like Daisy Bones, like I say, well, I just sort of throw it down and then it comes with what I want without the backing track was done. But then there's Sing, 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 and that was just my mate who played piano came round and, you know, we kind of just put it down.
Let's get to Rat's opus here. This is a very different style. It's not completely out of the range of the things he did with The Damned, because the range of what The Damned did was so freaking wide. How far back did this one go before we play it here?
I figure this one must have been about 92, 93 or something like that. It's got an emulator on it, so you can tell that kind of ages it.
Sure, yes, the quality of the string sounds, but I like that they're not super, super realistic. I like that there's something self-consciously, it just adds to the dramatic humor value. I don't know, something like that.
I like the fact that it's plastic and that you can tell it's plastic.
Uh-huh.
I think it's a big trick of the recording industry is to make everybody think it's done in one take and everything's perfectly natural. You know, and it's far from that. And so I quite like going the other way.
I look to the sea,
So are there any real drums in this one at all, or is this entirely a experiment in programming?
I played them,
Okay.
but it's an electric kit, it's pads. So that's why it's got the robot drum sound. But actually, I did play the parts, and I didn't sit and program with a mouse or anything like that.
Tell us more about sort of what motivated this very gothic creation here.
Well, it started from a guitar riff that I had, that opening violin chords, which when I played it sounded good, but it sounded a lot like London's Calling.
Oh, yeah.
When you did it on the guitar. So I transferred it over to the violins. And because we use that same emulator too on Eloise and Phantasmagoria, it immediately kind of threw it in that direction. And just the way the chords worked together, it made it much more dramatic and everything else. So that was kind of how it got round to that. And so the song just naturally evolved into a pompous piece of pseudo-classical music.
But yeah, it's almost like a theater piece.
Yeah, and the lyrics as well, and the words and everything. And because when it came to writing those, you know, me and Robbie just kind of sat down and I said, it should just be the most painful, heart-wrenching old drivel you can come up with. And, you know, bless his poetic mind, you know, he came up with something that, I like it. It carries all of those emotions that piece of music should have.
That's the funny thing about this. It's so overdramatic. It's very cheesy, but it still works. You know, he's still emoting like crazy, even if it's pseudo-Shakespearean kind of a joke. It still has a dramatic effect.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it's down to the listener. I think it's one of those things that if you're in that mood and you're in that gothic kind of atmosphere, then it works on that level. But if it's broad daylight, 11 a.m., then you can kind of see some of the humour that's in there as well.
Let me just play here the little guitar solo section.
That's Warren Fitzgerald from the Vandals.
Great.
Which is, again, it was that thing of getting people to do something that they don't normally do. You know, so getting Warren to play an acoustic sort of Spanishy solo was quite, you know, I think he enjoyed doing it because it sort of shows him off as doing something other than just punk rock.
Well, and it warms it up a lot. I like when acoustic guitars are put over synths. There's something just nice about that. That just makes it's not Depeche Mode.
No, no, for sure.
Can you say something about is this one of your first, I guess we're actually about to talk pretty soon about History of the World Part 1, which seems to similarly have some interest in orchestration here, but you've got some pretty distinct, it's not just one violin line that's following. You've got a little bit of counterpoint, and just say something about your interest in that, or, you know, is that something, are we going to hear a symphony from you at some point, or?
No, I doubt that very much. But I'd like to be able to say that I had it in me, but I don't. I'm not, you know, I don't have any sort of musical training or anything like that. Like I say, it's like if I can mess around with a keyboard and make something that sounds like a tune, then it is a tune, you know, and then I sort of work on it. And hopefully it does turn into something that's coherent and people like listening to. That's what it's all about.
So to get out of the instrumental part, it locks into this slightly repetitive thing. Let me just... So we have some nice drum punctuation to kind of get us out of this. Is that the idea? Is that it's basically a rhythmic idea to get out of that thing?
Oh, it's Dante's Descent into Hell, dear boy.
That makes sense. That's the March of the Demons or something.
Well, the notes and the dynamics of the song dictate, to me anyway, what it should do next. So that kind of descending bit was, for me, the perfect way to bridge into another dramatic stop and a place to rejoin the song proper, you know? Funny thing, you know, when you're sitting there making a noise and you're creating something, it's almost like you can hear the next part before you've written it. Yeah,
well, that's exactly what I'm talking about, that it seems like you do have a knack for instrumental composition, and the fact that you don't need, you know, when I write a pop song, it's generally the melody and the lyrics first. You know, it's the part that you don't do is the thing that determines kind of how long it's going to be. And depending on who I'm playing with, then like, all right, well, fine, let's stretch the middle section. Let's put an extra solo in. Let's maybe something with the group will make it get longer, but that you're starting with just notes fighting each other. And that determines how, you know, what's going to happen next. That's instrumental composition. Whether you have classical training or not, it doesn't matter. You can do this.
I had a certain amount of classical music in the background from my parents. So maybe some of that rubbed off, and along with, you know, bits of big band and jazz and things like that. Maybe, you just kind of subliminally take all that in, and then when you get the chance to do something that sounds that way, then you kind of know what to do with it. I'm not always big on formal education for anything. I don't know. I'm not sure it actually works necessarily. I think there's other ways to get the best out of people.
Plot-wise, you have, I saw them together, the knife in my hand, the game is over, he won't have her, I won't have her. I kind of expect this to culminate in some, like, Armageddon, like, stabbing frenzy or something. No, actually, it just sets into this swing groove and fades out.
It should do, shouldn't it? There should be a much more melodramatic ending, I suppose. I can't really speak for Robbie as he wrote the lyrics, but I think part of the kind of deal with that is that unrequited love thing never actually does get resolved. So I think that's my artistic get out of jail card. That's why it never really bothered me, because I saw it and I thought, well, I did think the same thing initially. I was like, oh yeah, we should turn it into more of a Delilah or something. It should be a bit more vicious and nasty, but actually it's probably a lot less true, and it's probably more vicious and nasty when relationships end up the way they do and they're up in the air and nobody ever gets what they really want.
Do you have any thoughts about the groove during that section? In fact, I'll play it. Again, it sounds weird because it's on electronic drums, and it sounds like you're doing a swing ride cymbal thing, but the ride cymbal doesn't ring. It's set up as a very stodgy, dum, dum, dum song, but then you're actually swinging over it. I thought was kind of hilarious.
Yeah, it kind of breaks into a three something or other there, doesn't it? It's sort of, well, that's how I think of it, yeah. It starts now. Yeah, it's like I was saying before, you get the piece of music and there has to be a kind of dynamic with it, and light and shade, and things have to change their sort of sense of direction sometimes just to, if nothing else, just to make the whole thing flow a bit more, which is kind of disjointed the way it does, but when you take a radical departure from, like, something, as you say, which is very sort of stamp along and 4/4, when you move it into something like a swing section, then all of a sudden it sounds like a real kind of breath of fresh air has arrived, and it kind of, I don't know, I always feel lifted when I hear things that do stuff like that.
I don't know if fresh air is in this particular context, but I see where you're coming from. Yeah, I think the easiest way to talk about your approach to drums on that one is actually just to get to our third song and contrast it, because this is also a very theatrical piece, but the drum approach is very different. This is a History of the World Part 1 from the Damned's The Black Album, 1980. Do you have any words to say about it before we play it?
This was kind of, it was Hans Zimmer, wasn't it, who produced this? I remember we did a lot of takes and double tracking of things just because we could, I think, that very first word of I and the echo that goes on it, Dave actually sung that like 126 times, And he really did just spinning in, just singing the echo and certain keywords on to get an effect that kind of was a unique thing. But it was weird because the idea was that the echo would be the population of the planet agreeing. Actually, there's something that happens, and if you only have one voice, it only ever sounds like one voice, no matter how many times you layer it. Even when, and in Dave's case, sometimes he was doing falsetto, sometimes, he did every single different approach to singing that one word that he could, but actually it always just ended up sounding like Dave Rangan singing. It's a strange thing with human voice. It's got a kind of fingerprint all of its own.
You think that I can stand to see me trip this way? You think I'm second hand? I have seen it all. She's the only one. She belongs to me. I'm the lonely one. Counting sheep and swatting flies. You think there's no more left. Talk is cheap. How many lives sustain a single breath? pinch of salt, sad about tomorrow. Sorry, but it's not my fault. While they were shooting at the moon, somebody got to know what hurt. But what's the scene or two in the history of the world? Some said to me, why'd you play so loud? What do you want from me? You corrupt the crowd. Miles of bridge you think we thought of nothing else. There's more important things than you can decibels. Leave it to tomorrow. Corporal Klotz and Stalingrad, they're the ones to follow. They're the ones that make me glad. Nobody like that, no one left. Nobody cares the rate you heard. Looks like we'll take a dying breath in the history of the world.
So let's set this up for folks that might be a little new to the Damned. So your first two albums were very straight punk. At least the first album, is known as just a punk classic with Brian James writing most of the pieces. Then that band breaks up, gets together without Brian, becomes a new thing, releases another punk classic right before this one, Machine Gun Etiquette. And then this is the album after this, the Black Album, which it doesn't seem coincidental that it kind of has the approach of the White Album, which is coincidentally how, when I was my college band, how we would describe ourselves. In other words, there's no consistent sound through the whole thing, that you're switching instruments, you're changing up the approach. It really is opening things up.
In a lot of ways, the White Album by the Beatles was kind of the first sort of venture outside, and it was because of the variation on it, and the fact it was different. And we couldn't really come up with a better title. And I just felt that there was a kind of, not a comparison in any musical sense to be made between the Beatles' White Album and the Damned's Black Album, but just in the sense that we both sort of, at that point, both bands had decided that they could do something different, not what the public was used to hearing them do. And so that, that was my thinking on it about the title.
I hadn't noticed until you're just saying it now, but, that it's listed as the producer is The Damned, but then also Hans Zimmer. I mean, was he working on you in all the songs or just this one? I mean, this is a famous soundtrack classical composer. People have definitely heard his stuff. You can look it up if they have not heard it.
I know, and he was a nobody when we had him. It was kind of one of those weird things. He was, he was really pleased to work with The Damned because he was trying to establish himself as a producer. And I can't remember the exact order of it, whether it was History of the World was the first thing we did with him, or Curtain Call. I think it may have been History of the World. I can't remember properly though, but I just remember that because he was kind of such a synthesizer genius, that was his real thing, and we knew wanting to use sort of kind of cool-sounding synths and some technology to a degree. So he kind of fitted the bill for doing that, because we wanted to be experimental, and we didn't really have a producer. So Hans was really great because he was kind of somebody that joined in with us rather than try to dictate the whole thing. It was pretty cool.
Whenever I see credits just given to the group, that's usually just a legal fiction, unless the group is truly just we jam every song and that's the way it works. But certainly something very layered and composed like this. Who did what? How did this come together?
It was mostly Captain and Dave, I think. And I can't remember. I think Roman Jug was around at the time. So actually, I think it was probably much more to do with Roman and Captain getting together. The kind of record company were pressurising us, and they always kept asking for a hit single. And if we'd have been capable of writing one, we would have. But we weren't. Really, we were just bluffing our way through the music industry and kind of just coming up with things that we thought were okay. But the thought of actually sitting down and with any sort of preconception of writing a hit record was far removed from us. And with History of the World, they were kind of pushing us hard for that. The idea really was just the concept of a song called The History of the World, which came up over a few drinks one night, because we were very big on Douglas Adams and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, etc. And it was just kind of part of that train of thought, I think.
This struck me as kind of one of the weirdest, least poppy songs in a way, but it is in the way of Bohemian Rhapsody, and certainly that main piano, I was trying to think what other 80s, like there's an Asia song that came out a year later that has that. I know there's got to be like an ELO or, several other things that have that very, it's almost getting into Meatloaf territory in terms of the drama.
In a funny way, yeah, and it was quite a good place for the band to be going to. The sort of kind of one-time punk band, and then we'd gone a bit more experimental, and in a way, one of the few damn records that had a bit of a social comment about the state of the world and what was going on in it. And so I think we kind of tried really hard with that one. I think it's a great song. It was always there, but it was never a hit,
Was this one of the ones that you contributed lyrics on, or?
I don't think I did anything.
Oh, okay.
I just played the drums and went home.
Well, let's talk about the drums. This is why I wanted to contrast this with the previous one, because here, the drums are just huge. Just in the intro itself, you've got these big drum and bass together, these very punctuated theatrical flourishes to get us into the song.
I just hit the ground, boy, have I arrived. Tell the dinosaurs they just won't survive.
It's kind of like the sort of precursor to Eloise, that sort of center dynamic of having a loud bang and then not having one, and then another one comes up and you're not quite expecting it. It was a stage the band were at as well, that we were beginning to feel our way around arrangements much more. But I mean, the drums on it pretty much, I didn't, as I remember, it was sort of all overdubs. It was one at a time, apart from the kind of verse parts. But all of the big accents hands wanted this kind of very, very clean Pink Floyd sort of drum sound. So I was only allowed to use what I was hitting. So it's like, turn the snare off, get rid of the cymbals, right? We just want this to do this. And so I was quite happy to be directed for that. But I thought we got a good result with it. I thought it sounded kind of aggressive.
Once the song gets going, it doesn't need 16th notes and a hi-hat all over the place, but it really helps to push it forward. But I could definitely hear with a slightly different producer or a different decision, just play eights through the whole thing. It doesn't need the really fast thing, but I really like it.
And the grave danger of the time was disco was such a big hit, and everybody really wanted you to just play fucking fours on the bass drum, just because that was the dance floor thing. So it got kind of difficult in a way, because it was, it was the last thing I wanted to do.
Yeah, it's like Xanadu or something. Just do the open and close hi-hat thing on the offbeats throughout the verses here.
But I mean, there was no way the band were ever going to do anything other than empty a dance floor. And I was kind of more proud of that. But then again, having said that, in other instances, it works pretty good, because there's something like Lovely Money. I think it totally fits that whole kind of just keeping it going, because the song's doing all the work and the words are the important thing. And so on something like that, I don't mind it so much. And History of the World, I don't mind it where it is. Yeah, that was the great danger, was always being influenced by disco.
Can we generalize a little bit to the State of the Damned co-writing partnership? Or is it really, this is my song and I'm making the decisions on this one and the next one's your song, even though they were co-written? Or was it very much, it's the group product and that's why we don't even note who did what, because it's just whoever produced it?
It was a group product, really, because we all had sort of strengths in different areas. Dave was quite a brilliant graphic designer, etc. And Captain was really always great with melodies and working on arrangements and tunes. And I was pretty good at a lot of the business things and some of the writing. And, so we realised, that actually if you were in the Damned, really you should have fair shares because we were all doing the same thing, and we'd all have different ideas for songs. Some of them would be a complete song, and some of them wouldn't. But it didn't really matter. What always counted was the end result.
Because you were getting co-royalties on everything, you didn't feel the need. I've been in situations where the guy who does the band business stuff is almost expected to be like the agent. Give that guy 15% off the top of all the show. There have at least been discussions around that kind of thing.
There was always that kind of thing, and it's always in the back of the mind. And the thing that got rid of it is you just turn around and you take the hit, and you say, listen, any one of us is capable of writing a great tune or a classic or a hit or whatever, and none of us know which one it could be. So let's hedge our bets and we'll all just break everything down between us. In a way, it's really healthy to do that because it means you don't have the ego problem of, I've only got 2 songs on the album and you've got 4. And you don't get that kind of jealousy and things going on. It works on that level. But then again, there are other levels where it doesn't. Somebody leaves the band and then you're still paying them for a record that they're not necessarily even on. But you gave them a right of credit because they were in the band.
Had you worked out some of this before, even just having 4 people on a podcast, we're like, okay, we're formally an LLC and we'll try to figure out, like, what if somebody leaves? How do we work out residuals was all that decided after the fact when emergencies arose?
We weren't that smart. It was just, listen, you know what, there's 4 of us doing this. Let's all just take the same because we were paying the manager and the agent and record company were taking their piece or whatever, and the publisher, so it was kind of there, and it just made it much easier to sit next to each other in the van without anybody feeling pissed off or that they weren't getting what they should have done. Or it definitely was a pretty good adhesive. I think it kept the band glued together.
Yes, I'm just now reading Bruce Thomas's book about his time with the Attractions and the various tensions that came up because it was not that way, because it was kind of, they couldn't even decide whether it was a solo guy with a backing band or a band that had a singer, and it was much more nebulous.
Get down to the power play and whoever's the manager and who's got the loudest voice is the one who decides. But, as the band was so unmanageable, we never really had that, so we made all of those wonderfully naive mistakes that you're all very young still and you're not that long out of school and you still trust people that are lawyers and have suits and supposedly represent your best interests. You don't realise that the world's full of shitheads, don't you?
Well, let's get into the last song by talking about your post. We've said this solo album is 15 years of work over the time, but that's not the only thing you've been doing. You've been sitting in with a lot of groups doing producing. The thing we were going to listen to was actually a cover of a Kraftwerk song, Autobahn, by the Germans. So that's from the early 2000s, is that right? The Do Not Fuck With the Germans EP?
That was a really good fun thing because I've been working with Chris Dollymore, and you sometimes get that kind of combination where guitar and drums just work really well. He had the idea to do Autobahn, and I thought, you're fucking crazy. The greatest synth pop anthem ever written, and you want to play it like The Who. And as soon as he started playing the chords, I went, yeah, I see exactly what you mean. I know what to do with this.
Yeah, it's like The Who doing the Beach Boys is one of the, those things.
I used to love the name because we'd sit there and every time anybody rolled a joint, we used to crack the joke of, where are your papers?
This should be a single. This should be played everywhere. I love it. And it's just a great way of displaying the drums at the very least. There's plenty of room for screwing around. It's a long song and there's not very many vocals in it. It's just almost like a surf tune, one of those old, 50s kind of things.
It's kind of like there's just a thing about the way that chord sequence worked. The way the structure of that song goes, it was just kind of like it needed all of those toms.
This seemed a very promising combo. I mean, was this a purposefully short-lived thing? I know you guys did some gigs so this is members of the Godfathers and other things.
We did a couple of things, but we had this philosophy really, which was if we didn't really feel like doing it, because it was all about performance, and it was about the mood we were in. And so we turn up to a rehearsal, and if one of the band didn't really feel like playing, we'd go to the pub instead and just hang out and chat and have a laugh and get a bit drunk and then fuck off and then maybe have another rehearsal a week or so later, and then we would go in and play, or whatever. But we always had that thing that if you weren't in a good mood and you weren't feeling good about doing it, then you wouldn't really do it very well, and there wasn't any point in being that way. So it was always better to just kind of go for the moment. So when you were up for it and kind of pushing stuff in. And that's what, I think we did a couple of gigs and it did kind of work that way. Everybody lifted themselves up for it. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed playing it.
So I know you likewise did another 4-piece with Brian James to do the 30th anniversary of the first Damned album. Any other work with combos like that you felt a sense of ownership with that might be promising outlets for your songwriting, or those are just purely performance?
I don't know. I very rarely see more than a few hours in advance, and I don't really think things through too much. I mean, I'm playing with Paul Gray with Professor and the Madman next month, which is a kind of first time in God knows how many years. So that's something, and I kind of dig Professor and the Madman because I quite like their attitude and their songs, and I think Alfie Agnew is such a great guitar player. So I'm kind of looking forward to that and doing that, and I'm doing the next Mutants album. So we're kind of halfway through our 5th record, but we got to figure a few things out there yet. So I'm kind of happy and contented and playing, and that whole thing about making career moves and trying to plot out where you're going to be in 5 years is, I'm too old for that now.
Sure. You've put in your 1,000 hours of rehearsal to get your craft is probably as good as it's going to get.
Yeah, exactly. I ain't going to get it any better now, it's kind of, so I'm quite happy, so in 5 years I'll be happy if I'm still sitting on my porch drinking wine.
So how does that work with the producer gigs? Like you did the Flip-Ron. I didn't see a sort of a definitive list of all the groups that you'd produced. Has it just been a handful of things over the years here?
There's been quite a few things, but none of them really commercially successful or anything. Bits and pieces, and a few things like the Gin Goblins are kind of cool. But it's more like I end up as a producer because it's a favour to a mate. Mm-hmm. And they're not really sure about what they should be doing in the studio, or they'd feel more comfortable with somebody else in charge saying yes or no, and that way and can't blame each other.
So you're not like being the Hans Zimmer and getting in and arranging their stuff. You're helping them to decide, was that a good take?
Because that's not really my job. If I want to interfere in the arrangement, I should make my own record. The music belongs to the band, and you're kind of there, and you can make suggestions like, well, nothing happens for 4 bars. Can we get rid of that piece? And you can do stuff like that. But actually the structure is all about melodies, and they're usually pretty much pre-written, so you can't really mess with things too much. And also, like I say, it's not my place. It's my place to get a great performance and to make it sound the way the band want it to sound.
It sounds like that was the approach from what somebody said in the documentary of Nick Lowe on your first really, that as producer, like, what did he do? He, just kind of handed out drugs or, set the atmosphere in some way, but wasn't like overproducing, I should say.
I think that is the art of good production, is choosing who you work with. Is probably way more important than, the arrangement of the song. It's like when you choose the band, then generally you're choosing them because they've pretty much got it right already. And they need a little bit of polish and maybe pointing in the right direction here and there to get the best out of them. All
right, well, to conclude, we're going to hear Autobahn in a second here. Tell me about, was there any production, so to speak, on there? Or was it just put the mics in the right place and let's go?
It was a big old 4-piece Ludwig kit, the one that has been out with the Stooges and has been quite controversial. But it was that one, I remember having it, and it had this huge fucking 26-inch kick or something that I'm not so used to. And it was like trying to tape down this thing. But I kind of dug it because all those big-sized drums are much easier to hit.
I wouldn't think it would matter with a kick, but, you're stepping on the
But the rest of the kit was matching,
right.
It was, all the sizes were big, and it was like, yeah, okay.
Well, neat. All right. Well, thanks so much for doing this. I've really enjoyed prepping for this and getting myself damned educated and all that. It's very, very cool body of work.
All right. Take it easy.
Have a great day. All right, thanks so much to Chris. The Damned had been one of those bands that I knew about, but had never really spent any time listening to, and I think it's a really great addition to my list of bands that I'm into. Next episode, we'll also look to the late 70s punk scene, this time in New York City. I'm going to be talking to Laura Davis. She used to drum with a band called The Student Teachers and wrote lyrics to a couple of Blondie songs. However, the focus of our conversation is actually going to be a book that she has just come out with, The Girl in the Back, a female drummer's life with Bowie, Blondie, and the 70s rock scene. So you can get that and many other episodes at nakedlyexaminedmusic.com. As usual, I encourage you to go to patreon.com/nakedlyexaminedmusic and make a small ongoing pledge. However, there is another project that I want to hit you up for money about. My band, Mark Linth's Dry Folk, is releasing a new album, and we really need help funding it. So please check out patreon.com/marklint to find out how to support that project. I hope my activity and Mr. Millar's activity here has inspired your activity. Keep on musicking. Until next time, this is Mark Lintonmeyer signing off.
Here's a love song, and it makes me glad to say